say probably Greg LeMond in his win over Laurent Fignon, the final time trial uh, in the Tour de France. And I
Cool.
had something to do with that, and that I got um, Greg LeMond connected with aero bars.
No
And
way.
yeah, yeah,
Hang on. There's like a whole legend that like he was the first one to use arrow
Yeah.
bars and like that's the whole story, but you're
Yep.
you're saying you're behind that. Welcome back to Bespoke Endurance. Today is episode 13 of Recreational Rider to Racer podcast series, where Josh and I are transforming into racers, leveling up on the bike, and in life in the midst of busy lives, work, young families. Hit that subscribe button and follow us if that interests you. You will not be disappointed. We are super excited this week. We have a very special guest joining us. Josh, why don't you tell everybody who we have with us?
Oh, man, we are absolutely thrilled. So we got Kent Bostick, who is a legendary figure in American cycling, renowned for his exceptional dominance in time trialing. Kent has been racing at a competitive level for more than 50 years. Notably, he competed in the men's individual pursuit at the 1996 Summer Olympics at the age of 43, showcasing his endurance athletic prowess. Throughout his career, Kent secured 11 elite and professional national championships, including victories in the individual time trial in 1985 and 1991, the road race in 1987, individual pursuit in 1993 and 94, and 6 team time trial wins. He also clinched gold medals at the Pan American Games, winning the team time trial in 1987 and setting the Pan American record for the individual pursuit in 1995. Beyond his athletic achievements, Kent worked as a groundwater hydrologist, often integrating his training into his daily commute by the bicycle. Hey, Kent, that intro is super impressive, but we just want to say out of the gate, thank you so much for coming on.
well, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, we are thrilled. So I want to kick it off. How did you first get into cycling, and what specifically? We've talked a lot on this show about the different types of races. So what drew you specifically to the time trial?
I was I had the opportunity to go to school in France when I was 8 years old, and my older brother got really excited about the Tour de France, and so we started following cycling, and then finally my dad bought a couple of I guess they were 8 speed bikes. This was even before they were called 10 speeds, right? So, but they did have down dropped handlebars. And sew ups, and we're fairly lightweight, about 21 pounds. And so I came back to the United States and I asked my dad, I said, Dad, I want to race bikes. And he said, No, son, they don't race bikes in the US. And in a way, he was right. That was like in the 60s, and it was a well kept secret. There was racing, but you had to know where to find it. So I really didn't get involved much in the cycling until I went to college. In summers, I had a haying job. I used to bale hay, and so I'd move equipment around between fields on different farms. And I was kind of a sharecropper, and so I'd have to use my bike to bring the equipment back and forth, so that somebody didn't have to transport me to get a tractor or Jeep or whatever. And so I bale hay, do bike ride, bale hay, 10 miles apart. And I used to commute to class and do some weekend rides while I was in college. And then they had a couple races, collegiate races, that were not sanctioned by the NCAA or anything. And so I did pretty well on those. And my last year of college, I saw the Tour de Somerville, and I said, that's what I want to do. The race was so exciting. There was a crash, and the crowd fell over the spectator fence
Oh,
into the road.
geez.
They weren't
That's
too
incredible.
well. I started racing. Just generally I raced whatever they had. Like a road race, criterium, whatever. And I went my first big I guess, achievement was that in my first year, I was able to ride a 59-minute time trial for 25 miles. And this guy
Wow.
that I knew who was a coach, he was prematurely gray. They called him the Silver Fox. And he said, well, that's kind of the benchmark for good bike riders. You can ride 5 miles in less than an hour. And it was 26 or 36 spoke wheels and a woolen jersey and a hairnet helmet, all that, and cycling cleats nailed to the bottom of leather cycling shoes. Wool shorts too. um, so the next year I raced a little bit, became Arizona road champion, and then I went to nationals and when it was up in Seattle, and they had an invitational team time trial for the top 10 in the individual time trial, and I had placed 10th place, so I got to do a team time trial. And the first four guys were on the first team, the second, 4 through 8 were on the second team, and 9 through 12 were on the next team. And so they set out, and so my team, the guys were fairly robust. They were all good athletes and stuff, but they weren't prepared for this kind of event. And so one by one they started tiring, and then they stopped pulling, and then they sat on, and then it got to the point where they couldn't sit on. And as you know, the first team is chasing me and the second team's chasing me. And so, like, I don't want to get caught. um, and so I asked the coach, what do I do? All these guys are blown up. And they said, okay, continue on your own. So I continued on my own. This is team time trial, three guys are supposed to finish, but it was also a selection race for the national team. So I kept going. And, I stayed away from the other teams. The other teams couldn't gain on me. And the officials go, what's this? So, one guy coming across the line. Anyway, so the coaches put me on the team, and they had I since I was larger compared to the other riders, and I guess um, kind of a different self as he goes more of a track rider. Anyway, they said, okay, well, team time trial was for the big guys, and they called them experimental big guys because they put them on ergometers. And there's this coach Eddie Borisevich, and he had scientific training methods. The federation had hired him, and so you know, the big guys were all called experimental big guys, and they were with less body mass were going to be the climbers and the road racers, and so I got to go to, I got to go on a bunch of the long story short, I got to go on a bunch of federation trips, for to gain strength to get better at these events, and so I got sent to Italy in 1978, I guess it was, and it was a big thing because hardly any Americans had ever raced there, and we did I think 30 races in about 45 days, and I
Wow.
got really
Holy cow.
I got
30 races in 45 days. That's
yeah,
insane.
and these are hard races, and we're getting. Oh, apparently they'd made the person we were staying with. He owned this hotel, and he wanted to get start money from the promoters. So he entered us in all these races, and I was thinking, well, the Italians are racing all these races, so I guess we do it. And they have two races before a stage race, then they'll have an 8-day stage race, and then they'll have two or three races afterwards. and, and we got them here. Okay, we're going to race them. And the funny
Wow.
thing is, well, we are all trying to make the 8-day race. So we were competitive, so to get the spot to get in the next race, and then by the time the stage race was over, we were really skinny and tired out, and then we got shipped around to all different regions in Italy. It was really remarkable, and so that kind of set my set my brain to what hard was. I didn't have illusions that cycling was going to be easy, or that I was gifted or anything like that. I just realized it was going to be a lot of work. But you have to embrace that work, and that's kind of where it's at. If you think that training is a sacrifice, you'll never be good. it has to be the thing you want to do.
Oh, that's really good. I like that.
Yeah. So when you are racing in Italy, at what point did you at that when did you know like I'm pretty daggone good at this sport now?
First time I went over, I did everything wrong. I was like a vegetarian hippie kind of guy, co-op food, type thing. And I was not used to eating meat and spaghetti or chicken and rice. Did like the San Pellegrino. Well, that was really good, but uh, anyway, so the second time I decided I was going to take vitamins and because I didn't go with vitamins the first time, I decided that I was not going to get on the massage table because basically the guys would give you like staph infection because they didn't wash their hands in between.
Oh,
Interesting.
that's fun.
And
It's crazy
somebody
how
would
that's
sick
evolved.
would get on the massage table and then everybody else would get sick. And and the funny part about it was that I went with this coach and the coach didn't like to go to all the, they had, it's very social after the race, all the coaches and everybody, they get together and have a big dinner. And our coach was he liked to go out and party. So after the massages were done, I didn't get to the massage. I went to all the meetings. So I collected all this great swag, all the present, they give you like little souvenirs from each town you're in. And so I came home with a big bag of that stuff. But also I figured out how to ride the races. Is there was this huge guy, Yurko, and he always got back on after we got dropped from the drive. After we get dropped on the climbs, and so I just follow him down the descents. And this guy was just a motor, and every time he'd get back on, he had like just a nose for it, and he didn't panic or anything like that. And so the second time, I was never dropped. And it was great. I was riding in the fields, and so then they sent me the one of the last races we did while we were over there the second time I went over in '79. Is they had this tour of Austria, and uh, and the last day I made a breakaway and I was riding these Russian tires that were kind of dicey because all our we'd flatted all our good tires, and so we were riding these $5 Russian tires that didn't have tubes. They're like soaps without tubes. Imagine that, right? In this breakaway with this Austrian guy, Harold Meyer, who later became a pro, and uh, and so we were at two up, and we had about 2 minutes on the field, and then we got caught by another five guys, and um, so it was coming in. The guy, Harold Meyer, asked me to pull for him because he wanted to get GC. He was in third place. And when we came into the sprint, I looked over at him and he was going off the back. So I said, well, heck with this. I'm going to sprint. So I sprinted and I won the race. And so that was one of the first Americans to win a race. Like it's before 1980. Who had heard of that? And so I thought that
Wow.
was pretty cool. Anyway, the guy never paid up because he said I sprinted. So my coach gave him a knee in the stomach.
Oh, that's amazing. As he should. That's
Yeah.
crazy. You don't get
Yeah,
paid
yeah.
for that.
Anyway, so that was my first, first big thing. I was like, wow, well, I guess, I did all this prep. I was riding, 7, 8 day stage races, and finally I had a result, and so I was like, well, okay, I'll continue, and and then I got back to the U.S. and that fitness carried on, and so I was able to like win the Prestige Road Trophy in Northern California, and uh and I continued to make trips with the national team. I went to Tour of Baja, won a stage there, and um then eventually I stayed with the team time trial team, and we got, I think, we placed top 10 at the Worlds in um, uh, Colorado Springs. At one point, we were in fourth place, but then we fought at a guy with like 25K to go. A guy flatted, and so then there were only three of us. So
Oh,
we
okay.
dropped down, I think, to eighth place. But that was my best international result until that point.
Man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you about two things. One is tell me a little bit about the national championships. I would love to hear kind of your experiences winning the national time trial championships in the 85, 91, and the road race in 87. I think that's really incredible.
The 85 one was my breakthrough into national championships. I'd always been knocking on the door, but never got it quite right. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you have to get into this zone of having the ability to win, and it's not automatic. And sometimes, you get it, sometimes you don't. And and uh, and so
What does
my
that mean? I'm curious. Like, speak more into that. That's really interesting. What do
well,
you
a
mean by
lot of
that?
people target, they say, oh, I'm going to go to the nationals, and they don't win, and then they quit. And you have to go to about four or five, or well, in my case, about 15 of these things before you win one.
Mm.
And each year you're improving a little bit. And then finally, once you win your first one, then, you know, it's like a burden off you. A
Mm,
burden's been lifted off your back,
yeah.
because some riders call it the stink.
I like that.
And so then once you have that and you think, well, I won once, okay, I can do this again. And then, I had wins in team time trial and so forth after that. And the win in 90, what was it, 91?
Yeah.
That came at Lance's expense.
Oh, okay.
So I
Okay.
had to ride two time trials that day. So I had an early start time, and because I had to ride another 40K race in the afternoon in tandem. And if you've ridden 40Ks, pretty much one day is enough. And so like this two up was my coach planned it, but I put all my effort into my big my individual time trial. And what was kind of interesting about it is that I had this thing, they called it a hooker bike. It was so aero, it looked like it was run over by a truck, and somebody picked it back up. If you turned it, front two, you couldn't see, all you saw was wheels and handlebars. It didn't even have cow horns. The guy wanted to be so aero that he had to just have only the aero bars, in front.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't let me have a chain. He wouldn't let me have a derailleur, front derailleur. And I'm like, yeah, but what if the chain comes off? Well, sure enough, the chain came off. And so, 55 K per hour after reach down, pull the chain back on with my finger, right? And
That's
then kept
wild.
going. And so anyway, that was my mishap, but I won handily, and so that was a favorite win, I guess. The
Oh, okay.
86 road race was kind of funny because, or 87 road race was kind of funny because I wasn't known as a climber, and it was on the Morgul Bismarck course, which is a very difficult course outside of Denver. It's got crosswinds, and it has this thing called the wall, which is the finishing climb. And this day was a day, a race for tough guys. First of all, they didn't limit the number of racers, and there's something like 300 starters.
Holy cow.
Wow. That's a lot.
And it was raining, and 50 degrees Colorado Front Range, nasty weather. And they had this crazy yellow line rule with all these people, and a motorcycle basically squeezed the field because people were over, and caused this huge pileup that took out at least 50 people,
Ooh.
that and so after that it was like, okay, well, I'm just going to survive for a while. So I survived for a while. And then towards the end of the race, it came down to a select team. I was on 10-speed drive, and I had one other teammate in the break, and there was Team Crest, and they had about three or four riders in the break in this group. And there was this my teammate Andy Bishop wanted to be a professional, so he was desperate to win the road race. So on the last lap, he kept on attacking the group, and each time the group would come up, and then once they caught him, they were so tired that they fan out across the road. So after that happening twice, I said, the next time he does that, I'm going to shoot. I'm going to ride the tail of this thing, and when it mushrooms out again, I'm just going to shoot by everybody. And there was a guy named Randy Wicker who was up the road, and he had about a minute. And so the next time that guy Andy Bishop attacked my teammate to get away, sure enough, they chased him for all they were worth, and then they spread across the road. But just before it mushroomed, there was this one guy who had like these childbearing hips, and it was like blocking the road. And I had to turn sideways to go by him almost on the shoulder. But I came by 35 miles an hour. And then I got up to this other guy that was off the front, Randy Wicker. And and it was his team that was basically chasing my teammates. But he wanted to win for himself, so he says, "Okay, let's pull equal. Um, I don't want no fooling around." And I'm like, "Oh, that's just great for me, pull equal," because he had six guys in back and I had like one. So the pull equal thing was it was like almost a gift, and so. We had to go about 5 miles to finish the break, and then we had to climb the wall. And so we decided we were going to drag race up the wall, uh, uh, you know. And so we're drag racing up the wall, and finally, at the last minute, I guess he shifted up, and then it was too much for him, and then he shifted down, and so he sat back down, and so I finished ahead alone, and he was actually out of the finishing picture because maybe cramped or something like that. And so kind of all these guys, they thought, oh, well, Kent's not a climber. So they actually thought they were absolutely convinced that Randy Wicker was going to win, and he didn't. So I guess moral of the story is that it's not over till it's over,
Yeah.
and and do your secret training. My secret training was I did hill hill repeats in Garden of the Gods.
Oh, okay. So that was the key for you.
Yeah, Hill repeats, and so they thought, well, Kent's going to get dusted, but the thing about the road race is, okay, I had to do before the road race, I had to do an individual time trial that I got second, and I did a team time trial that we won, and then we won the road race, and I was beaten by Norm Alvis, who was a former teammate and who was designated to be Motorola Pro, I guess, the next year or whatever. But anyway, he went on to win the Pro Championships. We're friends, and yeah, we've been friends and rivals and teammates and so forth. But he's a good guy.
I love that.
I know that's crazy. I want to hear about this hill, but
Yeah. Oh,
let me ask you this. So I want to, if it's all right, I want to fast forward to the '96 Olympics. So um, when I first learned about you, it was kind of that story. It was the qualifying for the Olympics at the age of 43, which that immediately caught my attention because I thought, man, most guys in their 40s have kind of retired from the Olympics at that point. They've kind of hung up those shoes or whatever, but you are at 43 qualifying for the Olympics while maintaining a full-time job, and you had a family. So can you kind of talk through that a little bit? What did that look like? What did training look like? Like, how are you finding the time when you're working full time?
Okay, well, for instance, I had a deal. I worked for Jacobs Engineering, and I was lucky that I had a deal where if I needed to take time off from work, I could.
Okay.
But this is back in the age when the work at home thing, nobody was doing it,
Yeah.
but basically, I'd leave work, I'd go away for the weekend, I'd have a stack of uh, hydrology reports or documents that I had to review, comment on, or whatever. And so, in between, training and racing or whatever, when I'm sitting on a plane, I have these documents open, and so I'm reading and making comments and able to to be somewhat flexible, And then during the week when I'm in there, I would ride to work, I'd ride home, and they'd have a Tuesday night criterium. So after work, I'd ride from work to the criterium, ride the criterium, ride home. And, all that winds up almost being like 4 hours of riding in a day.
Okay.
And so
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm getting, Wednesday was like an endurance ride, with maybe a group. And then Thursday we had a time trial, a 10-mile time trial. And if you wanted, you could even do it twice. So,
If you were
so,
crazy enough, if you loved it enough.
so I'd ride my time trial to work, then I'd ride my time trial bike up to the top of 9 Mile Hill in Albuquerque, and then do the time trial sometimes once, sometimes twice. Then I'd ride back down the hill, go along the Rio Grande out to Corrales and back to my house, and say that's another 4 hour ride. And then, you know, Friday, Friday, uh, Friday, would be a short ride, or sometimes I didn't get to ride, and then I'd be on a plane. And so it was nice because back in that day, there was Southwest, you had $30, $40 flights, one and didn't charge for your bike. And so, I could fly to California or wherever I wanted to go on the weekend to find the best race. And we had some racing, in New Mexico but generally I was able to prepare myself with all these sort of like race type efforts during the week. And um, when I was well during the Olympic time period, I had a wife. Her name was Carol Ann, and she decided she was going to race. It was kind of funny. I met her at El Tour de Tucson, and I
Oh,
had
I've done that one. Yep. It's fun.
oh yeah,
Yep.
I've won it 6 times.
I've won at 0. That's amazing.
You have to step up your game now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so
I love that. You've won
so
that
so
6 times. That's incredible. Oh man. Okay. Wow.
Josh showed up.
Because there's thousands of people that show up for the tour. That it's awesome. Yeah. But there's thousands of people that show up for this.
How long is it?
100 plus. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, it's anywhere between 100 and 116 miles, depending on
Yeah.
how the
Is
route.
it is
But
it is it like more like a fondo? Is it a straight up race or?
no, it's a straight up race. But when
Okay.
I did it, they had two gravel sections where you had to ride through these washes, and there
Oh.
and
Didn't have.
so there's one at the start of the race, and then there's one halfway through it, Sabino Canyon. And so, you had to be at the front, and then otherwise, the people would fall down, and then you'd wind up walking. So, a lot of times I was able to win or in a sprint or solo, and it's kind of funny because my specialty, like everybody says, I was a time trialist. Well, I use that to my advantage because I could go as fast in four, the fourth or fifth hour as I could at the beginning. I can
Mm,
still hit over 30 miles an hour, and there's not many people that can do that.
yeah.
I can't do it anymore.
I'm also trying to think. Gosh, you're riding through gravel on what, 19 millimeter tires back then?
Yeah, that was before gravel racing and so forth, and so you're like thinking, well, do I risk the flat or do I want to ride bigger tires and have rolling resistance? And Bart Bowen, who was later a pro champion, and my ex teammate, he was the one that kind of pioneered the big wide tires.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
What would he
Yeah,
rock? What was his size? He was
probably like 23, 25.
Which is so
Yeah.
crazy. It's so crazy how far it's come because like
Yeah.
you show up to a race now with 25, people look at you like, what are you doing? This is a road race. Why do you have 25 mil tires on there?
Well, like for example, I can remember riding 19 millimeter tires for time trials and things like that,
Hmm.
and they're good on smooth surfaces, and they're good on the track. And I rode some pretty fast times on those tires. I'm not completely sold on the fat tire thing. I ride 25s. What I do like about them is that the bigger the tire, they don't pinch flat as much.
Yeah. Okay, well, so I'm curious about this. Even with the Olympics in the backdrop of this, I think what's often overlooked by many, well, maybe many recreational riders and maybe those that are new to racing, but I would just love to kind of just spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the mental discipline, because I think that, with all the training, you build up the physical side of it, but I just would love to hear you talk a little bit about that mental discipline, how that played a crucial role in your success in racing.
I can train hard and I can train long, and that I was able to build on my robustness, my ability to go hard day after day. And that got me to a higher level. And the thing about it is that, I use training kind of as a visualization of what I'm going to do in the race.
Mm.
And so I'm working on skill sets as I'm riding, and so I know, like, if I wanted to sprint, I know if I start my sprint here, I can accelerate all the way to the line, and I know what the level of effort is. Like for instance, now with aging, it's kind of in the reverse. It's like I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can do that. So you have to adjust to what you can do. And
But you're saying you would visualize, like even during these, these group rides, maybe these weekday things that you were doing before you would visualize what it would be like to be racing in this, where you're thinking like, oh, okay, now I'm ready to sprint, and you're thinking about that during your ride, and that helped you prepare mentally for when it came to race day.
part of it is that I guess I don't have performance anxiety, and
Ah,
that really cripples a lot. It's almost crippling. And and if you think that you're going to fail, well, that shouldn't enter your mind. You know, just
okay.
think positive thoughts and say, well, I did this in training and I've won before, and and then basically uh it's almost like music, if you play music, you have to execute something at a certain time and do it well.
Well, I think that's interesting. I just want to like kind of highlight what you just said, because I think that's really interesting, and I think that's something that could potentially block a lot of people or maybe help them if they're trying to take it to that next level, which, for us, both Greg and I are transforming into racers. But part of it is just that interesting dynamic where if you haven't raced before, if you even haven't raced a lot, there is a little bit of that anxiety that probably naturally comes with you. You're just like, I don't know what to expect. This might be a lot quicker than I think. What if I don't finish the way the time I want, or what if I like bonk, mid race or something. But what you're saying is like the negative thoughts really they should never enter your head. It's just about executing, just like in a music, where you've got a specific part and you need to play that. That's your mental game that you need to be locked in and not think about that negativity that might occur when you're, in a rough, when you're physically at a level where you're thinking, man, this is really difficult. But you're saying mentally, you're like, yeah, this is just a part of it. Like that's that positive shift to say, hey, look, I've done this, I've won, I can do this again. This is okay.
I'll give you an example. Okay, Pan Am Games. Uh, so you had to go through a qualifier, and then after the qualifier, you do a semifinal and a final. So in the final, I have to come up against this Argentine champion, and this is in Mar del Plata in Argentina. And so it's full stadium, just like soccer fans banging on the boards and yelling, screaming, And so I'm up against this Argentine guy. I set the Pan Am record in the qualifier. He beat me. He beat the record in the semifinal when he raced against somebody else, and then we're together in the final, both Pan Am record holders. Him, the current one, and me, who lost it about 12 hours ago. So so uh, I'm sitting there, and this guy. Okay, I'm 42. This guy's 20, and so I'm like, and everybody's screaming for him. There's nobody screaming for me. And I'm just thinking like, this doesn't matter, all this karma. I'm just going to beat this guy.
Ooh.
I love it.
I'm going to show him. And so he started fast, but I had a better position on the bike, and so I was just going to do my time and let the bike and my position and my skill do the work. So he goes out fast. He's like a second and a half ahead of me, and we're going to go around the track. Everybody's going bang, 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 like falling around. It's kind of like a wave with thumping. I can barely hear my coach, but I'm riding my splits. I'm riding my splits, and then with 3 laps to go, the coach goes, "You're even." And like I go, "Oh man, 3 laps to go. Okay, 750 meters. I'm gonna just crank it. Wah, right up, right." And I beat him by a second. And
Wow.
so the stadium's absolutely quiet. They're stunned. They're absolutely stunned. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be bad.
I'm gonna die
I
on
don't
my
know
way out
what's
the
going
door.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I should get off the track. Somebody's going to throw something at me. Anyway, so then the people started clapping. They realized what an effort it was and how good the sportsmanship was and things like that. And so that was kind of my focusing, my karma, like not having self-doubt.
But it was from those previous races that you knew you instilled that confidence in you to say like, yeah, I'm going to beat this guy. Like that's what gave you some of those maybe initial races that you did early in your career before the Pan Am. Like those got you that confidence that just said, yeah, I can do this. I can beat this guy. Like there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I had all this training, coaching, get international travel, and it, 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 it I'm a product of the Cycling Federation. I really am.
Okay.
I went through the program and used it to my absolute benefit.
Love it.
Yeah, and I think what's crazy is you're still going. Like when I met you last month, it was at a race, and you're
Yeah.
there to race and be competitive. And the first thing I noticed when I met you was, and you're wearing it now, your world champs stripes.
Yes.
So I
That's
want to
so
make sure I
cool.
got this right. You won the world champion UCI Masters World Pursuit, and you're the record holder into your 60s when you did that. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I won it, and I had it for all age categories, and then they built this track at like 8 or 9,000 feet in Mexico, and so then they have these trips now where people go there and they set the record, and so I did it at sea level in competition, and I had to even go around a guy that I caught, So I went a long way around the track, I think that records should be done in competition. This other, I'm going to go to Aguas Calientes and have some kind of special doping control and however they do it. And you do it like when I set the world hour record, they said, okay, sometime today we're going to have a time where you can go to the track and do your hour record. So it's like I'm kind of warming up for several hours, and then they go, okay, you're up. Get on the track, ride the record, break the record, right? I rode about the same time that Eddie Merckx did, 49.3 kilometers per hour. And
Gosh.
and that stood for 20 years, and
Wow.
then now people are breaking it. But and that's all ages, even younger ages, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I was a I guess I'd say that I had at the time I had a pretty prodigious talent. Now people with coachings and they come up, but that was kind of the standout performance.
Man, that's
I
incredible.
know.
That's awesome.
I think what's so crazy is the drive is still in you to keep competing. Like nowhere have you been like, I think I just want to kind of just go ride my bike, just cruise around. And I think that's
Yeah,
like no burnout.
yeah. Well, it's just interesting because like what I think one of the questions I wanted to ask, and this kind of lends into this a little bit in terms of just like for those maybe trying to get into racing, it in terms of just like both Greg and I are pretty competitive. Most people who race, I would assume, are going to be naturally pretty competitive. But the question for you is like, for those that are amateur racers and those that are beginning to racers, like as an Olympian and national champ, like what's the biggest piece of advice you give to like guys and gals that are new to racing?
I had a nutrition sponsorship with Shackley, and I did it all. I did all my racing with supplements. Okay, by supplements, I'm talking about food extracts,
Okay.
and and uh, and they're not really vitamins because basically, what Shackley did for me was had protein powder, they had sports drinks, they had recovery drinks, they had energy bars, and then I took a number of different supplements like their multivitamin, their omega-3 vitamins, and I also took their iron tablets, calcium, magnesium, and it's kind of funny. Like I would, you know, when I was had all those supplements, um, it's my I got my and living in New Mexico, I got my hematocrit to 49.
Holy cow.
Wow.
you know, and I finally went, this was like before they had EPO, right?
Yeah.
And so I went back and looked at some of my, I had a lot of physiological testing from, the Colorado Springs laboratory, and they'd always take my blood test. And, two or three times I had this super high hematocrit like that from the supplementation. And, and I was, that made time trialing easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't
And and now I live at sea level, and I'm a cancer survivor. And after I had cancer, and I went through immunotherapy treatment. I have gotten my hematocrit past like 42, 43.
isn't
So
the UCI limit uh where they really like raise flags is it 50 or 50?
yeah, it's 50.
Okay. And you just through like food supplements got it to 49. That's crazy. So like
Yeah.
per like that's just crazy.
Yeah. Say more about that for those that might not be familiar with that. What does that mean? Like,
Well, okay. If you look at your VO2 max is a combination of your respiratory quotient and your ventilation rate. So you can see that I have a big chest, right? And so that helps me with my ventilation rate because I can move a lot of oxygen in and out. And then it's available for my bloodstream. Now, the respiratory quotient is basically your body's ability to process oxygen. And for instance, if your blood can carry more oxygen, then you're going to increase your VO2.
yep.
So basically having iron in your system in your bloodstream allows it to carry more oxygen. The training, the living at altitude, the diet. I ate meat too, red meat too, and uh, the I was kind of it was very interesting to me too when I went back and looked at that data. And so you may not be that, like, for instance, you may not have all of those factors, being able to live at altitude, be able to
Sure.
train every day at your limit, and then have I because I had a good job. Food was never an issue for me. I could eat the very best foods that I wanted to.
Okay. But you would say that for like those for new racers, your biggest piece of advice would be like focus on your nutrition. Like that would be a huge component of it.
For instance, I had a guy, Todd Gogolski, and he was a phenomenal climber. But when he first started racing, he'd have to take a month off or in the beginning of this or middle of the season because he'd get tired because he didn't have good nutrition, and that was limiting. And so, people that get burned out, that's the reason for it. But then another part of it is periodization, means that you don't go hard every day. Like for instance, you have days when you go hard, you have days when you rest. And like for instance, the national track program, they go hard 2 days, one easy day, 2 days hard, an easy day, and they just ignore what's going on in the racing. They don't even let you do racing.
Okay.
And so that's one way of looking at it, that for most people that work a day, what they have is they have this 3 days a week in the middle. You have a 3 day training block, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you rest Monday and Friday, and then um, you have your weekend races. So that's a 3 day training block where with rest days on either side.
Okay. I love that.
We need to call our coach.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that though. That's really good.
The other thing is some people say, well, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that, and they have these weird things that maybe the coach thinks is going to help or benefit them. But the beginning part of the season, basically you should ride to get your tendons and everything in shape, because your muscles get more fit faster than your tendons. So that's where this LSD comes in, through, long, slow distance. And the the period, people talk about periodization. Like I'll start with efforts, and then efforts will get more intense as the season goes on. But I don't have something where I do just one thing for one time, like one certain kind of interval,
Yep.
and then stop and then go to something else, because you'll lose your skill set. So you have to do a little bit of everything every week. It just that it gets longer and it gets more intense as you get to the middle of the season. And in the middle of the season, you may find that, your rest days, you have to take them really easy.
Yeah.
And you may want to ride by yourself.
Yeah, that's really cool. I actually really appreciate you saying that, because that's one of the things that our coach has us doing, where it's just the same type of like the super threshold, the sweet spot workouts, but they've gradually become, the times of them have become longer and longer. So when it would start out, might have started out at 4 minutes. Now some of them are up to 6-7 minute intervals. But what you're saying from so far, but then you're also saying too that like, you don't go hard every time. There are rest days. It's super important. Take advantage of that, and like focus on your nutrition, because otherwise you will burn out quickly.
Yeah, and the other thing is have a workout partner, have a buddy, that, because otherwise, you might turn around when it's raining, or you
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
and the other thing that's important about that is, for instance, I have a training group, and we all decide we're going to have a race ride one day a week, okay? And so people don't people come on that ride and they're prepped for it. Okay, they realize they're going to go hard. And so what you don't want is, and then we have easy days where maybe we do an easy group ride, and it's zone two or something like that. But you don't want people coming in and ripping your legs off when it's supposed to be your
Yeah.
easy day.
Yeah,
So
Josh.
so part of that is having people that have the same goals that you can share with, and you get in sync with each other.
Yeah. I love that.
All right, before we go any further, we want to give a huge shout out to Road ID for not only supporting our podcast, but also letting us film right here at their headquarters. If you're a cyclist, runner, or just someone who wants peace of mind while out on the road, Road ID has you covered. Their medical IDs provide crucial info in case of an emergency, and they look great too. Do yourself a favor, check out roadid.com and grab one today. Big thanks to the team here at Road ID for their support. Kent, you got a Road ID?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Love to hear it. We
That's great.
also want to give a big shout out to Kentucky Open Road Racing Series, who is partnering with us this year to bring you an exclusive deal. If you're looking to race in the Kentucky Open Road Racing Series this season, use the code BESPOKE15 at checkout for 15% off your registration. Whether you're a seasoned racer or just getting started, Course has something for every level cyclist. Head over to KentuckyORRS.com and use the code BESPOKE15 at checkout. That's BESPOKE15, which you are now signed up
Now signed up
for the next one.
Next course.
So we are doing the race together.
Yeah, let's do it.
Kent, you coming up?
Kent's gonna
That'd be so awesome.
Kent's gonna blow it out of the water. Okay, so now we're gonna jump into a rapid fire. So, first question for you, Kent. Favorite moment ever in cycling?
I'd have to say probably Greg LeMond in his win over Laurent Fignon, the final time trial in the Tour de France. And
Oh,
I had something to do with that, and that I got Greg LeMond connected with aero bars.
no
And
way.
yeah,
Hang
yeah,
on. There's like a whole legend that like he was the first one to use aero bars,
Yes.
and like that's the whole story. But you're
Yep.
you're saying you're behind that.
yeah. Well, he was at the tour.
What?
He was at the uh, at this. I guess it was the Tour de Tour de Pont, the Tour de Pont. Okay, and in the first time trial, I used the air bars, and I only got beat by Ekimov and Van der Arden, and they had TV cars in front of them, right? And I was the first American, way ahead of everybody else, right? And so Lamont comes up to me and he goes, "Oh, tell me about these aero bars, blah blah blah. Where'd you get them? Blah blah blah."
Oh,
You
no
know,
way.
That
and
is
and 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 so I connected him with Scott because Scott was making the bars, right? And so and Lamont was going terribly in that race. I mean, he was even behind me, and he wasn't going good. And he's like, what? He knew he needed something to help him out.
Yeah.
So then I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I see Lamont riding the bars to victory over Fignon. I'm like, yeah, right on, buddy, right on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's incredible. Okay.
I want to segue into the question I'm excited to ask because that kind of segues it.
Yep.
So okay, you've been racing for 50 years, and we have seen in 50 years, and really the last, gosh, even 20, bike cycling tech just continue to advance. And I think a lot of pros, when I listen to them that are retired, have said, "Oh, it'd be cool if I had that when I was racing," but you're still racing. So you have raced the whole gambit of equipment. What would you say is the biggest cycling tech advancement where it's like that is something that, everything else is marginal or together, conglomerated, but that's the one thing that I would not ever want to race without?
Well, I like the tires nowadays,
Hmm.
and I'll tell you why is because they're round and they don't go bump 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 bump, and actually, you don't have to glue them on. And the other, for instance, when I first started racing, I had open sores and wounds for the first couple of years because I tried to do things that the bike couldn't do. And little skinny tires that basically didn't ride well in the rain. You'd fall. You make one simple mistake and you're on your butt. And now that like these tires are so sticky, and if you combine that with carbon fiber wheels and the compliance of the bike, the ride is just so fantastic that like for instance, I have maybe one bad fall every 3 years.
Hmm.
And so people say, well, cycling's risk. Well, I don't think that's too much of a risk. And I will admit that usually when I fall, it's my fault too.
Okay.
So something I didn't predict, but I think that's made a huge amount of safety. I also, as a heavier rider, I like the disc brakes and the way that that you can almost stop in the middle of the corner. What I don't like is when I go to a race and my wheels rubbing, like these gentlemen fix a rubbing wheel. You
Derek and
know,
I helped fix it. He had some brake rub and his rear wheel wouldn't turn
Oh,
like 10 minutes before his race. So
yikes.
Derek and I kind of got his caliper. Mostly Derek. If he's watching, I held the bike and I held the brake lever. Derek did all the work, but I knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we
yeah,
got him.
yeah.
We got him working though.
Yeah, they add an expense to cycling. Uh, I think that nutritionally that there's a lot that's known now that and sports drinks help the gels and recoveries and things like that. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
caffeine is still the same old caffeine.
That's right. Okay. So, as an Olympian and national champ, have you ever mentally cracked in a race? And if so, what did it teach you?
Well, not so much in racing or but in training, people beat me up all the time. And kind of the idea is have a goal, be focused on the goal, and like there's so many people that race every time they train and
Mm,
then they get tired, they get burned out, and or they're trying to settle scores like, oh, this person did that or that. Doesn't matter. And we don't have any of that score settling on our training rides. It's like everybody pulls the same amount. And when we do intervals, we're rotating before a sprint. Everybody pulls like nobody's going to sit out. They're going to do their work and then they're going to get the chance to sprint. So the thing is, you have your goal, and in the early season, there's people that are really fit. You get dropped maybe, but you just make sure you finish.
mm.
And you'll have your day if you have a slope, a steady progression to where you need to be. You have to look at it in a long game as a long game that
Yeah.
you you may lose this fight or that battle or this sprint or something like that, but overall you're proceeding towards something bigger.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's a huge takeaway for, especially for those that are new or like me, for example, like it's just mentally thinking about like, this is a long game.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be good right away. But if I keep at it, if I keep training, if I keep pouring myself into this, eventually you will become good.
It,
Yeah.
it takes 5 years to just, get your body fat down low enough and acquire the right kind of muscle redistribution before you can have your best results.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Okay. So 5 years. That's a that's the goal.
So,
That's the goal.
so the idea is have fun,
Yes.
don't put too much pressure on yourself because putting pressure on yourself, your body isn't going to change overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a one thing that you would tell others that like showing up to like those towing up on the race line? Maybe they've raced a little bit, maybe they haven't raced that much, but like would you just tell them like just have fun? Like mentally that will help unlock just that anxiety, maybe that's there, maybe they're too stressed about their performance or maybe they're thinking too much about the end result, but you would say, "No, just have fun. Like enjoy it." That's the point.
At my level, most of my friends are cyclists. And so that's why I enjoy going to races. I see people I haven't seen in a while
Mm,
and I get to meet new people like you guys.
yeah.
And that's all great. It's all part of enjoy the experience, not so much. Don't be so result oriented.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I think at times we do good at having fun,
Yeah.
but sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is maybe rather than racing every weekend, do a bike tour and do a Grand Fondo, and those are good for introductory people because it's okay. In the Grand Fondo, you ride with a group until you get dropped, you get something to eat, and then you ride with the next group.
Yeah.
Or in a bike tour, you stop and get some food, and The pace is a little bit less than in a road race. But so I combine all those kinds of things, and they help you get fit. Like for instance, if you do a 4 or 5 hour bike tour, even if you're only going 19 or 20 miles an hour with all the terrain and everything, if you live where we do, that it's going to be a fitness gaining uh
Experience.
ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. My last question for you is, when you show up to racing today, is there anything that you've raced for over 50 years? Is there anything that makes you, when you see other people, other guys, other gals out there, that just makes you roll your eyes? Is there anything that you see today that you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these guys are doing this?
Like the most ridiculous?
Most ridiculous thing you see in racing?
Well, I get I kind of don't understand gravel racing.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I like this. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's hear it. Let's.
Well, first of all, the most dangerous part of a race is the start. And if you are pushed into a start where you have to ride in a road and you can't predict what's going to be in the road, and it's packed so tight you can't move out of the way, that is just it's a recipe for disaster.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And for instance, we have training rides that leave from this shop, and we'll get these people that come in from out of town, and a lot of them are gravel riders, and they want to go on a group ride, and and they have some kind of horrendous story about how they had got a broken collarbone or some really bad accident from being pushed into this ditch at the start of the ride.
Yikes. Yeah.
And so like for example, the sport, just like triathloning, has the weakness of drafting.
Yep.
Drafting. Like the gravel has this fatal flaw of the start.
Well, we just want to say we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for you being willing to come on to this podcast and just give us so many gold nuggets. Man, we would love to just invite you back at some point as well. We would love to. There is probably 50 questions that both Greg and I would have still loved to ask you, but we're just we don't have 4 hours to take of your time tonight.
And we're on rented time.
That's right.
We're not in our own facility, so we're on someone else's clock.
Yeah. But yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and just the pieces of advice. I think it's incredible.
Well, thank you. I'd love to come back on again.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, hey, if you've liked this, please share this with a friend who's thinking about racing. We would love to even hear from you guys. What stood out to you from what Kent was saying and our conversation today? But again, we thank you, Kent, and we will see you guys soon.
See ya.